On the state of FF14 story, a character similar to Wu Clement, where we go from here, possibly dropping PS4 support, and where the heck is FanFest? These are all subjects and more that were brought up in a new interview with Yoshi P that we're going to be going over, breaking down, and extracting all the juicy tidbits from it. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls, and let's get into it.
Wouldn't have come this far without you.
We now head on over to the interview by Feed for Gamers with Yoshi P. I'll leave a link in the description down below for anyone who wants to peruse it, but we are going to begin, well, with the beginning of the interview. How are you satisfied with Dawntrail's story conclusion in patch 7.3 and reactions of the players? The story for Dawntrail was really difficult in terms of developing that story because we were dealing with some quite complicated themes such as what it is to live and what it is to die, but also in the expansion there was an introduction of many new characters, so the hurdle that we had set for ourselves was quite high for us to conclude the story by this timing, and we had to work right until the last minute on making all those adjustments and fine-tuning to make sure that it was all concluded. But first, from our perspective in the development team, we think we are satisfied with what we did, and also from a schedule perspective, to think that we had made it on time, that was also one area where we felt at ease. With the ending sequences in patch 7.3 and the cutscenes that we were showcasing, of course we had our players who are the hero take one more step in the spotlight, and our players are all playing different jobs, but we wanted to make sure that we could showcase the uniqueness of their jobs in each of the attack scenes, and we put a lot of hard work into the theatrics in order to produce a finale that would be fitting for the story that we wanted to tell. So from that perspective, we felt that we had completed what we had set out to do, and that was what we thought in the development team. And you know what? I largely agree. I really liked that finale, especially that bit where the Warrior of Light actually did things in the cutscene. That doesn't happen all that often in Final Fantasy XIV. So the fact that we had such a prominent role in a cutscene and having it largely be based on what your job is, I thought that was really dang cool. And so with regards to player feedback, when I was in Japan before coming over to Germany, I checked the player feedback, and I could see that generally there was a good response. And now that I've come to Gamescom, this is the third day that we have been having interviews, and I've had the chance to meet members of the media, and they've been telling me as well about what aspects of the feedback they found from the community, which were received very well. And taking their comments into account as well, I feel that generally we did quite well in the patch. Again, I would agree, considering the foundation they had to work off of. Like, let's be realistic, 7.0 and 7.1 weren't really for everyone, and it really does feel as if the story took a massive change in overall direction from 7.2 on. You could even argue the last bit of 7.1 on, but largely with 7.2 and 7.3, it felt so different in terms of the execution, in terms of the pacing, in terms of the tone, in terms of the actual writing and the dialogue. It felt far more in line with the elements of FF14 story that I had fallen in love with all those years ago, and despite not really having all that much to work with, whereas ordinarily a 0.3 would have a really good 0.0, 0.1, and 0.2 to work off of, Dawntrail's 0.3 kind of only had 0.2, and it had to salvage the, scattered little bits of intrigue from 0.0 and 0.1, and I think it did a really good job of doing that, especially with a character like Calyx, and also especially with a character like the real Queen's Fiend. As I've said before, I think 0.3 was relatively a safe patch MSQ-wise. Nothing too overly controversial beside the Ascian bit at the very end. Nothing really controversial happened. You had a character death for someone most people I don't think particularly care about, but it was handled rather well within the story. You had interesting development, and I think the finale itself was well handled and well executed. And they didn't go for anything particularly risky like killing off Fiend. You could argue the main, risk element is reintroducing the concept of an Ascian in the story, but we know nothing about that character or what they're going to do with them. So besides having some people who are just like, ew, Ascians, ew, I kind of fall in the camp of, okay, you won me back with 0.2 and 0.3. I'm going to hear you out with where you want to take Winter and where you want to take this Ascian character. There's a lot to be done here, and we just have to wait and see. But with what I was shown in 0.2 and 0.3, I'm very happy with the current state of FF14's writing. Okay, let's have a little bit of fun here. Can we expect a new character similar to Wu Clement to kick off a new story arc in patch 7.4? I mean, shout out to Yoshi P for being direct here. No. If I say too much, it's going to be a spoiler, so I won't say that much, but in patches 7.4 and 7.5, we are going to be moving towards a new big story arc, and as we are moving to that, because we are starting that movement, we won't see a new character appear, which would be the basis of that story arc. So basically, no such character would be making an appearance yet. Of course, they're just kind of referring to a new key central figure for the next big story arc. We're not going to get one of those in point 4 and point 5, essentially. But of course, we had the final scene at the end of patch 7.3 when the Ascian made an appearance, and he just calls him an Ascian, so there goes the tinfoil hat theory that it might just be a dude who stole an Ascian's wardrobe. And also there was references to Winterers. So from patch 7.4, there will be an introduction of new elements to see just what is the context behind that. It will not be a lot of new things being introduced, but I do hope that players will look forward to it. I know that you don't want to spoil things, but do you see a potential in including other Tural characters in the next plot development? Yes. If I answer that, it will be a spoiler, but of course what I can say is that the adventure in Tural has now come to an end, and the tension of the story will change drastically. That part catches my eye, because, well, what do you mean by that? Is the tension going to go up, or is it somehow even going to go down? I think it's fair to say the tension went up a lot with point 2 and especially point 3, and with them laying the groundwork for this next big story arc, I kind of feel as if it's going to become more tense moving forward to build up to whatever 8.0 will be. And especially with Yoshi P coming out and talking about how, like, the summer vacation is over. Insert what summer vacation jokes here. I have to imagine the story is going to become more tense and possibly a little bit more dark in the coming updates. But again, this is something we'll just have to wait and see. They're not just going to come out and just say it, right?
Wouldn't have come this far without you as
Here's a question where the answer to it I'm not particularly satisfied with, so let's get into it. Being more than a year after Dawntrail launch, would you do some things differently, like distribution of content, dungeons, or raids? The answer: rather than the distribution of content, we are working on creating big changes to the content hierarchy in the game, and starting with patch 7.35, we will be introducing a new deep dungeon which is called the Pilgrim's Traverse, and with this, we will be drastically changing the approach to deep dungeons. So this new deep dungeon will be one which both hardcore players and casual players can enjoy, and this represents a change in our approach to content design. So this is something that we will be working more on as we move forward, and so this is starting with Pilgrim's Traverse in patch 7.35, but from patch 7.4 and the new variant dungeon series, we are also working on changing the content design so that more and more players will be able to enjoy the content. So in other words, we want all the players to enjoy the content that we provide, and we'll be making various changes to this and moving forward. Okay, we talked about this yesterday with them really embracing modular difficulty, quantum, whatever you want to end up calling it. When they announced quantum difficulty for the deep dungeon Pilgrim's Traverse, it really did feel like they were laying the groundwork for where they wanted to move the game towards. One of the biggest critiques Final Fantasy XIV gets nowadays is the amount of content that is released and when that content comes out. People say that we don't get enough content, and that when we do end up getting content, it comes out way too late in the expansion or the patch cycle. I would agree with both points. Now, it seems the way that Final Fantasy XIV and Square Enix wants to address those critiques is not by necessarily making more content to fill those gaps. It's to make it so that when they release content, the majority of people will want to interface with it to some degree. For instance, when they make an ultimate raid, let's be fair here, not too many people, like not a big slice of the pie of all of Final Fantasy XIV's player base, are going to play that content. You're creating that content for a small minority of people that want to play it, and for other people to vicariously experience that content through streams or uploaded videos. Likewise, if you make a piece of content, like say a variant dungeon, or you could even argue, say, maybe even a deep dungeon, you will have some people that will probably try it out, but it may not click with them, and they just move on and stop playing that content. And if that is the big central feature for the patch, if you didn't manage to grab them, well then that patch is looking quite dry, right? And then the next time you announce a piece of content like that, they're probably not going to be that interested in it, and they may just end up ignoring it, and then view that patch to not have that much content. Yoshi P also talked about this back during the live letters for 7.3. If you are a hardcore player, chances are, odd-numbered patches probably didn't have all that much for you unless there was an odd COD Ultimate coming out for it. And if you are a far more casual player, or someone who didn't want to partake in really difficult content, an even-numbered patch, which is primarily for a new raid tier, again, probably didn't have that much for you. So it seems as if their goal, their solution to this problem is, instead of necessarily just making a bunch of new content to appeal to a bunch of different niches, they want those pieces of content that they release to appeal to a broader audience and to have a wider net. So for things like a modular difficulty scaling piece of content like Quantum, people that don't want a particularly hard time of it can do, well, low number offerings, so the fight isn't particularly that difficult or anything like that. Or they can just interface with the regular deep dungeon, and for those that want that really big challenge, you can work up to acquiring all those offerings and then, well, use a bunch for a really hard fight. And I've talked about before how I really like the idea of a sliding scale of difficulty in Final Fantasy XIV. Modular difficulty is an idea that I think can work, but the problem is, if this is their only solution to a lot of the feedback that is being thrown at them right now, I don't think it's sufficient by itself. I think it's a fix, it's a direction pivot that can work extremely well if it's introduced alongside other changes to the game that also act in service of addressing player feedback. I think a big one of those right now would be job design. I don't think we're going to see anything drastic until like 8.0 when it comes to job design. I'm just going to say that right now. Maybe we do. Never say never, right? Like, cross your fingers. I just think it's way safer to think that if they're going to do a bunch of big changes to job design, we're not going to see that until the next expansion, which is still a while away. It's not like 8.0 is coming out in 2 months or anything. And with the way that Final Fantasy XIV is developed, by having things in the pipeline months ahead of schedule and planning and starting to begin working on things months ahead, I don't foresee like many giant systemic changes to the way the game releases patches, again, until potentially 8.0, and even then, would I like to see content be released earlier in a patches cycle? Absolutely. Would I like to see a lot of big endgame systems introduced earlier into an expansion? Absolutely. Do I think it's really freaking stupid that stuff like limited jobs, like Beastmaster, aren't coming out until the 0.5 patch? Absolutely. That releases close to the next expansion than the expansion it was advertised for. That undercuts and undermines any excitement you built with that feature, with that content for the expansion's launch. Yes, you've done it before with Blue Mage, you have new people here, and also just because you do something before doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's right, and doesn't mean you shouldn't fix that or change it going into the future. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I hope when we get to 8.0, we can get stuff like Cosmic Exploration or things like the Occult Crescent and or things like a deep dungeon way earlier in the expansion and not wait until we get to like 8.25. Get that kind of stuff, or at least one of those things online in the 0.0 cycle, or at the latest, in my opinion, the 0.1 cycle. MMO players are hungry beasts. They're ravenous. You will never be able to release enough content to satisfy everyone. It is an impossibility. It's never going to happen. However, I do think it's fair to say that Final Fantasy XIV, and this is not a new thing, by the way, but again, as I always talk about, just because it's not a new thing doesn't mean it's okay. Final Fantasy XIV doesn't put out enough content for a lot of people. I don't think it's particularly healthy for a patch's release to essentially just be, hey, especially for an odd-numbered patch, by the way, I don't think it's healthy for it to be essentially, hey, we got a new main story, it's gonna run you a couple of hours, we got you like an extreme trial, and like you either got a new raid tier or a new alliance raid, which in total might run you a couple of hours a week. I think a patch needs more than that. It needs more for an MMO player to sink their teeth into, because it's all well and good to tell people that, hey, if you aren't satisfied, go take a break, it's fine, which is also something that I advocate. You won't believe sometimes how much more fun you can find an MMO if you just go and take a break from it for a little bit and then come back to it. However, I am going to stress this point here because I do think it's important. It is an MMO. Not only do we buy the expansion itself, we also pay a sub fee. People want that price point to be worth it. And I think it's honestly a good thing that people are upset about this point, because it shows that people want to play the game. If like no one talked about it and everyone just shut about Final Fantasy XIV, that would show apathy for the current state of the game. But the fact that people won't shut up about it means that people still care. And like, yeah, as we've talked about before, you're never going to be able to make enough content to satisfy every every MMO player, we're ravenous beasts. But like, we do need more than this. But what about point 4 and point 5? What about Beastmaster?
Wouldn't have come this far without you as
You already dropped some hints on this, but could you tell me a bit more about what's coming in patches 7.4 and 7.5 regarding content, gameplay changes, and stuff like that? Story-wise, maybe? In terms of one of the elements that we have planned for the patch 7.x series that we haven't shared so many details about yet with the players, there is the new limited job, which is the Beastmaster. This is quite a big content. I'm assuming this was translated, by the way, so don't get hung up on the grammar or like, well, you know what I mean. This is quite a big content that we are going to be implementing in the game, and it is both a new job, but we are also producing new content for it, and there will be dedicated content for it. So maybe something like a Masked Carnival, but for the Beastmaster. For those that haven't played Blue Mage, Masked Carnival is a series of like in-game challenges that really test your mettle and your proficiency with the abilities you get as Blue Mage. And there's even some like weekly rewards you can get by doing it. So maybe something will be similar for that for Beastmaster. Because of this, we are investing a lot of resources and cost into producing this content, and we will just barely make it. But we are expecting to release this in the patch 7.5 series, so I do hope that players will look forward to it. We're going to get into Beastmaster in a second here because there's a lot to talk about with it. And in terms of the story for patches 7.4 and 0.5, we had covered a bit of that discussion just now, but we are once again sliding off in order to build up to that next peak. In patch 7.4, the progression of the story will not be so fast. I kind of figured that. I figured it'd be a little bit slower. But you will see a faster acceleration in patch 7.5, and for patch 7.5, the plot has already been finished, and we have started the voice recording, the voice acting, and it will be different to Dawntrail. I think that's essentially Yoshi P saying, look, we get it. We understand not too many of you like Dawntrail. Don't worry, we're not doing that again. So I do hope that players will look forward to it. Yeah, there you go. Rather than there being a focus on Tural itself, there will be more exploration about the 9th reflection. But come to think about it, I've said too much now, so I'll just keep it at that. My theory about us using, like, Solution 9 as a base of operations, and that being a way to keep, like, speed in the story, could still have legs here, I'm just saying. Yeah, never count me out. But yeah, I think it is fair to say there's a lot more positive reception to the story when it's dealing with, like, Alexandria and the 9th reflection as opposed to Tural, because that part of Tural in 7.0 was a big reason you see this negative reception to the story for Dawntrail, because of the pacing, because what they chose to focus on. You know, when people are experiencing a new big expansion story, they don't want to spend a lot of that time dealing with, like, trying to tame an alpaca and that being done off screen, or having a giant story arc about, like, tacos, or, like, building a float. They want something exciting, they want something interesting, they want something emotionally captivating, and for a lot of people, myself included here, the part of the story that pertained to Tural didn't focus on elements besides Yaktel. When we got to, like, the Mamulja bit with the children in the jaw bit, like, besides that one element, Tural didn't really provide that, and the overall writing and the dialogue didn't help things as well. This really does feel like Yoshi P saying, look, we get it, it's in the rearview mirror, it's in the past, we're moving on. Now about Beastmaster. I'm in two minds about it, because I think Beastmaster as a limited job could be a really cool experience, and it could be super fun depending upon what their idea of Beastmaster ends up being. I'm sure that its Masked Carnival type of content could be really cool and fun and interesting, and I'm sure for quite a while there's going to be a lot of people that will almost certainly end up enjoying Beastmaster. However, we're going to hear a lot of people say, why is it a limited job? Why can't we just have a job like this, whatever it ends up being, mind you, as a regular playable job in the game? I think we're going to hear that a lot, especially with how many people are currently dissatisfied with the state of Final Fantasy XIV job design. And if Beastmaster ends up coming out and people love that thing and it's super fun and interesting, and then people go back to playing the regular jobs, they're like, dude, what am I doing with my life? I think even more people are gonna go, why can't I just use this? I'm gonna hold my thoughts on that particular topic until we actually see what Beastmaster ends up being, but especially if it's a job in the archetype of taming beasts and having them under your control and utilizing them to do damage, that is an archetype for a job slash class in an MMO setting that a lot of people out there absolutely love and adore. I mean, look at the history of, like, World of Warcraft. Hunter's one of the most popular classes historically. A lot of people love that archetype. FF14 FF14 doesn't have it anymore. Like, the closest we have is like maybe Summoner, and I mean, come on. So I do think there's a distinct possibility, especially if Beastmaster ends up being good, it's going to really particularly highlight the state of FF14 job design and how kind of limiting it can be in terms of creativity and just pure imagination of what you can do. But alas, we still don't know much about Beastmaster. But we do have precedent. We have Blue Mage. And yeah, Blue Mage can be wildly broken and stupid, but can also be fun. And there's a lot of people out there where historically one of their favorite jobs in Final Fantasy games is Blue Mage. And the fact they can't use that aesthetic, that idea in regular content can just be a bit deflating. And like, would it be hard to make Blue Mage work with all the other jobs? Yeah, probably. But I do think it could be done. I think the most important thing for a game to focus on and prioritize is to make the game itself fundamentally interesting and fun first and foremost. And the concept of limited jobs is just that. It can make jobs feel limited in design.
Wouldn't have come this far without you as
We also have Yoshi P's thoughts on like the PS4 and when or will Final Fantasy XIV ever drop support for that console. Some games have recently dropped PS4 support altogether. Can we expect FF14 to still support PS4 for the next expansion, at least 8.0 till the 8.5 series? My basic stance is that I do want to continue supporting hardware which has grown old, but I do have one concern, and that's regarding the OS of the PlayStation 4, and this is regarding the hardware regulations which were made by Sony. These regulations are related to the limit of the data, and because there's that limit of the data, well, we are continually incorporating updates for Final Fantasy XIV, and we are now approaching that limit. And so for this limit that's in place, we have been asking Sony Interactive Entertainment from our side to increase that just for Final Fantasy XIV, and they have kindly been doing that so far. But they've told us now that they're also reaching their limits. So I will repeat myself. I do want to provide support for platforms as long as possible. However, there will eventually come a time when the hardware is at its limits in terms of its technology. And at that point in time, we would have to provide an end to the service on that hardware. But I will be sure to provide clear reasoning for that decision when I communicate it to the players. So eventually he's saying, look, it may not happen now, and we're gonna wait as long as we can, but eventually it's just going to be too old. And much like what they did with the PS3, they're gonna kick it to the curbside at some point. It's just when they end up doing that, they're going to tell us. Though it would be really funny if they just did it randomly one day, just because I want to see the internet's reaction to that, you know? Sometimes you just want to see the world burn. Maybe another one on the platforms. An Xbox version is still quite recent for the game, so how's the feedback on Xbox? And maybe looking at the data of the players, do you see any changes? Are there any patterns that are probably different, that they are interacting with the game in different ways, playing in different ways, and stuff like that? We have been increasing platforms in the past, and we have been asked this question before about, for example, whether there's any difference between PC players and PS4 players, but I don't think that there's any difference. In terms of the feedback that we received, players generally said things like they said the patch, or said things like they want the patch to be released really quickly, or they want a lot of content to play. And so it was very much along the lines of general feedback. And so I think we're now at a point in the community where they don't really think so much about what platform, and we basically have that same general feedback that's gathered. Basically, he's saying people won't shut up, no matter what platform they're on, about when patches come out and the amount of content in there. And that whether or not you're a console player or a PC player, everyone's kind of united on that. Now, it's funny to me because you would think the PR answer to this question would be to just say no and move on. It's like, no, people kind of like united on that. We get generally the same type of feedback, but yeah, it's not really like dependent upon which console or platform they're on and you move on. No, he specifically called this out. And he's like, look, a lot of people are just like saying this. They don't like when the patches come out, it's way too long, and they want more content in that. Just something to keep in mind for when we get to like FanFest season and the announcement of the content for 8.0 and 8.x. Because even he right here is saying that, like, this is general feedback. Like, this is generally the stuff they get. Which means it's not just, like, a few scattered people that are allowed online saying this. We'll see how it's actually incorporated into the game, because I don't think just doing quantum difficulty is going to address all of that. I really hope that's not just the only solution to this. I think it can be part of a greater solution, but it can't be the entire solution. There are already talks about the next generation of consoles, whether it will be Xbox something or PS6. So do you see Final Fantasy XIV as it is already a cross-generational game, but going even further into the future for the next generation of consoles? Of course, there's always the possibility of providing a game on those platforms, because my aim is to provide Final Fantasy XIV to as many players as possible, and so if there is an increase in platforms, we would work on providing the game on those platforms. Specifically with regards to the recent platforms, they are quite high spec, and so it's easier for us to work with them compared to back in the days. So I don't think any addition of hardware is a negative in that regard. But when I look at things from a gamer's perspective, I feel that there's no real need to make new hardware, because I think right now people are happy with the Xbox Series X, the PS5, or the Switch 2. And honestly, from a gamer's perspective as well, hardware is just expensive to buy. Yeah, I think for a lot of people, there isn't this big hunger that used to exist for like even more high-spec games that are far more intensive and resource intensive to look way more pretty than what they used to be, because games are super pretty nowadays. And I feel at this point, people just are like, I don't want to keep spending all this money, especially for upgrades, which are like nice, but they aren't groundbreaking, like going from a PS1 to a PS2. You will obviously have some people that will want more powerful hardware, absolutely. But I do think it's fair to say for a lot of people, they're just kind of like, hey, can we just get more games? And can we just get like more great games at that?
Wouldn't have come this far without you as
And now here's the big one, which depending upon what their announcement tomorrow is, could age a little bit funny. Can we expect a new Final Fantasy FanFest series in 2026? When and where? And am I invited? Laughs. We are planning fan festivals for 2026 and continuing with preparations. And I'll answer your last question now because we've had such an awesome interview. I'm pretty sure that the team will be asking you to join us for FanFest. As for where and when the FanFest will be taking place in 2026, it would be great if you could just wait another few days. Wink, wink. Especially with the anniversary of A Realm Reborn just around the corner. Wink, wink. And what I can say at least is that for the Fan Festival in 2026, we will not be doing it in Las Vegas in August. Laughs. Who the hell thought that was a good decision? Guys, I have a great idea. Let's have a giant convention with a bunch of sweaty gamers in the middle of the August heat in the desert. Are we throwing? Like, who thought that was a good idea? Guys, I have a great idea. Let's have a giant outdoor gathering in Siberia in January. Yeah? Now I'm thinking. And don't forget to sign up for the Chain to a Boulder festival that's taking place in the middle of the Atlantic, by the way. Okay, like, jokes aside, to me, when it comes to if you are not completely satisfied or you are really not happy with the current state of the game, do not look to point 4 and to point 5. I think we'll see more quantum stuff, more modular difficulty stuff, but when it comes to completely changing the entire philosophy of what a Final Fantasy XIV expansion's life cycle is like, I'm not expecting anything like that in regards to point 4 and point 5. I think our best bet is to wait for these fan festivals because it is there that they talk about the next expansion. We don't get all the information for an expansion just at the first one, right? It's broken up into 3 different fan fests, one in NA, one in Europe, and then one in Japan. And they reveal more information at each of those fan festivals, so it's not like we're gonna know everything about 8.0 and 8.x when we get the first fan festival in America. That's just not going to be happening. But we are going to start learning about the new expansion. And it is there that I think, hopefully and ideally, we see a lot of this feedback that was bubbling underneath the surface for the longest time and has burst forth with Dawntrail. I hope we see a lot of that feedback taken into account in 8.0 and 8.x, and I hope it's addressed at those fan festivals. I don't think there's much point in being rather optimistic or pessimistic in regards to, oh yeah, they're going to like save the game, they're going to ruin the game. I don't think there's much point in entertaining either of those notions right now. It's best just to wait for those fan fests to see what they're doing. Whether or not they just like stay the course and keep doing what they're doing or some version of that, that, or they go big, they're swinging for the fences, we'll find out then. Later this week, I'll have an entire video about the things that I want to see out of Final Fantasy XIV's future. Gonna give you a hint, job design's gonna be a big one for that.
Wouldn't have come this far without you as
I think Final Fantasy XIV is at a crossroads. I think it's getting better. I do. I think Quantum's a really cool idea. I do. I think the story has gotten so much better with Point 2 and especially Point 3. I do. But I do think the game needs more of that. You will never be able to perfectly satisfy everyone online, and I think it's the endeavor to do that that was Final Fantasy XIV's greatest flaw for the longest time. But I don't think that necessarily should be justification for just staying the course and continuing doing what they're doing right now. I think the game does need improvements, and I don't think those improvements are outside the realm of reality. I don't think they need to completely change the game or anything or make it like World of Warcraft 1-for-1, but I do think the game can be improved. I like what they're doing. I think stuff like quantum difficulty is interesting, but I really hope they have more than just that. But we will find out. And if you want to be there for when we do, you should leave a like and subscribe. Follow me on TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter, Jmulls G. I have a Discord in the description down below. But this wasn't the only interview Yoshi P gave at Gamescom or around Gamescom. It's that time again. It's time for a victory lap because I was kinda right. If you want to find out about what, you should check out this video right here for more. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.